Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have just over 2 hours of horror stories. We have stories ranging from rules, the deep sea, and so much more. If at any point you feel that this video deserves one, please be sure to drop a like rating. It helps so much with the algorithm. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated. I post content just like this every 5 days. Enjoy the video. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. Growing up, we had 2 rules. 1, always follow the instructions. 2, never go upstairs after dark. We pulled into the driveway around 5:30 p.m. It is a long gravel path, now overgrown, just far enough from the 2-lane county road to be entirely hidden by the oaks that line the property. I'd forgotten the rumble of tires over rocks and was surprised by how much that feeling reminded me of home. Just beyond the trees, I see it for the first time in 20 years. My childhood home is a 2-story colonial with a big wraparound porch and a double-door entrance. In my memory, the house was a glossy white that would reflect the sun so brightly, you could see it through the trees from the road. It looked diminished now in the evening light. Perhaps it is natural for houses to turn gray and wither when left alone. People do the same. Nadine put the car in park but left the engine running. Then her hand was on mine. "Just say the word and we'll go." She promised, and I knew she meant it. I felt so small for wanting to take her up on it, but I shook my head and looked at her, and before I could say anything she kissed me, deep and long. The fear washed away and did not return. "I believe you," she said. "Do what you need to do to say goodbye. I'll be right outside." If there's a word for the kind of love you feel when your partner steps out of their comfort zone to support you, I don't know what it is. It made me feel brave, though, and that's what I needed tonight. I unzipped the backpack in my lap and pulled out 2 plastic egg timers. My watch told me it was 20 minutes until sunset. I set the timers, gave one to Nadine, and put the other in my bag. If I'm not back when this goes off, call my phone. Do not come inside under any circumstances. I love you. "Love you too," she said, and then she pew-pewed me with finger guns, and the cuteness of that made me laugh. 20 minutes, I promised. Then I scooped up my backpack and half-jogged to the house. I was 9 when my mom remarried. Up to that point, it was just the 2 of us, and we'd always rented an apartment near Mom's work. So I was excited to have a proper dad, finally, and to move into a great big house with so much land. The sellers were an old Southern couple who'd outlived the need for such a big house. They made Mom and Dad uneasy, though. They stipulated in the sale that we all had to meet with them and promised to follow 2 rules. 1, always follow the instructions. 2, never go upstairs after dark. Our realtor suggested that we play along for the sake of the sale, so we did. We smiled politely and promised to follow the rules. I wish we'd asked more questions, though. If we had, Mom might still be alive. I stepped into a shallow foyer and closed the door. It was dark, but enough light came through the windows to show me dust-covered picture frames. Our family of 3, forgotten in time. I kept my eyes on the floor and waited by the foyer table. You hear them first. They flutter toward you like moths to a flame, and you must remember not to panic or scream. That only makes it worse. Just keep your head down and wait for the instructions. The note card slid into view. 1, keep your eyes down. 2, stay out of the kitchen. 3, do not make a sound. P.S. Follow me. She is upstairs. Then it took me by the hand and led me into the house. Its hand was cold. Curiosity got the better of me and I peeked at its face. Raven black curls framed a stern-looking middle-aged woman. She squeezed my hand so hard that my knuckles popped. And with her other hand, she held up a single finger. Got it. I kept my eyes down. My guide led me upstairs to Mom's sewing room. That's where I found her body. She was still wearing her blue dress with yellow sunflowers and a single shoe. All that remained in those old clothes was a bright white skeleton. It almost looked like a Halloween decoration, if perhaps too real. I put the egg timer on the floor nearby. 10 minutes. Then I got to work. I dumped the contents of my backpack so that I'd have somewhere to put Mom. The little cylinders inside fell to my feet and rolled around on the floor. Then I reverently gathered my mother's skeleton into my bag. Something shuts off in your brain and you have to do something like that. You don't think about the details of which bone you are touching or who it belonged to. I had to pry a piece of charred firewood out of her right hand. Looks like we came to the same conclusion, Mom. I'm nearly finished when I hear Nadine's voice downstairs. You have to leave now, I yell. My timer went off, she called back. Like 5 minutes ago. I have been calling you non-stop. There's a reason we always followed the rules. Topsy had the body of a person, but with 2 long arms and great claws that scratched the old wooden floors when it prowled the upstairs rooms. Its skin was yellow-brown like cigarette-stained paper, and his face was upside down. That's why I gave it that name all those years ago. All that was left of my egg timer fell from Topsy's hand and landed with an off-keyed ding. Still crouched near the place I had gathered Mom, I grabbed one of the cylinders by my feet and slowly unscrewed its cap. I spent the last 20 years trying to make sense of this place. I made lists for everything and followed rules obsessively. But there's no therapy for downstairs ghosts and upstairs ghouls. There's no treatment for a monster putting Mommy in the fireplace. One night, Nadine gently suggested that conquering my fears would help me move on. But fear is not an enemy to be defeated or a mountain to be climbed. Fear is a house. In my house, there are things dark and scary and unexplainable. Drinking myself senseless did not work. Therapy did not work. Even finding love, real love, didn't work. Those things cannot hurt a house made of wood and stone and ghosts and Topsy. No, for this house. Only fireworks. I pulled the string on the cylinder in my hand. The flare burst to life and Topsy screamed and recoiled. I popped another flare, and another until it was surrounded. The room was well aflame by the time I left the house. Nadine and I stood in the tall grass of the front yard and watched the fire spread. We didn't leave until the house collapsed in smoke and burning embers. I refused to move until I could no longer hear Topsy's screams. We buried Mom on a hill about a mile from the ruined house the next morning. I said a few words and marked the grave with sunflowers. Nadine cried, and I felt like I should have. But I didn't feel sad. I felt relieved. It was finally over. We got back to the car a little after noon. It was my turn to drive. I made a U-turn in the yard and headed back up the gravel driveway. I couldn't resist one look at the smoking ruins in the rearview mirror. My eyes stared on it until it was no longer visible through the trees, and then I turned onto the paved road and headed home. I pretended not to hear the distant wailing cry. So did Nadine. I had read the earliest entry when it was first bequeathed, and I didn't think much of it. He passed in 2010 from supposed Parkinson's, but we never really knew what happened, just that it was very sudden. However, we wanted to do a 10-year celebration of his life when the pandemic hit, and had to postpone it until this year. I thought I would transcribe the journal and have it available to have pieces of it read at the celebration, but I've been reading it, and I'm somewhat in shock. Here's the current transcript. February 3rd, 2000. Dad's been gone for a week. I feel empty. It was so sudden. No one expects an aneurysm. Mom was silent for a while, but she's here now. She cooked for the first time in months, given it was honestly weird tasting. But she's really stepping up, being the mom I always needed. I have to go. It's time for his funeral. And I have to be strong. Mom refused an open casket, but it's probably for the best. She has some weird superstitions, and maybe that's one of them. My 10th birthday is next week, and I'm having a party. But it just feels wrong without Dad. February 3rd, 2010. Wow, my diary from when I was a kid. But my last entry was when my dad died. That's morbid. Not much has changed except Mom still doesn't cook. She cooked for around a month after he died, but she was bad at it. Nothing ever tasted right. I threw up a couple times after dinner, and the meat always came out feeling wrong on my tongue, so she stopped. It's my 20th next week. 10 years since Dad died. Mom acted funny at first, but she's back to normal now. I never actually got to college. We didn't have the money to afford it, but that's okay. Mom didn't ever really work much afterwards anyway, so I never got my hopes up. I'm just grateful that 10 years later, we're okay. March 9th, 2010. I've been getting a lot of headaches lately. I'm probably just dehydrated, but it's still annoying. Mom has been getting snappy, and we've fought more than ever. I think it might be time I move out. I still live in the small town I grew up in, and it might be time for a change. March 30th, 2010. New apartment. I don't know why I brought this old diary with me, but it's totally nostalgic. I was a pretty cool kid, I guess. I've had a ton of arm pain recently, but I don't know. It's probably stress. Mom practically kicked me out when I said I might leave, and traveling to Austin was a weird experience. I'm used to the middle of nowhere, and this most certainly isn't. The headaches have gotten worse, but Advil seems to help. April 19th, 2010. I'm having difficulty walking, which is really weird. I went to the doctor, but they just prescribed me with pain meds. And I didn't even remember to mention the balance stuff. I've been tripping too. How tired am I? I have a job interview tomorrow, so hopefully I'll feel better by then. April 20th, 2010. I got the job. Meet the new assistant coordinator of this cute little startup. So much work to do and the pay is crap, but I'm still excited. My hands have been shaking all day. April 27th, 2010. Or all week. May 13th, 2010. It's Dad's birthday. Mom called today. She couldn't stop crying. Then she couldn't stop laughing. She called 4 times, each time forgetting she called before. I'm scared. Before I left, she was having trouble walking. May 25th, 2010. I'm going to visit Mom. She's bedridden at home and I need to see her. I'm taking a week off of work, so there goes that promotion. I can't lose her too. May 26th, 2010. Mom barely remembers me. She can't eat and I can tell it's almost over. She handed me a letter, but I'm too scared to read it. I just want to be here for her. She is all I have left. May 27th, 2010. She's gone. May 28th, 2010. I still haven't read the letter. I've scaled back on work, partially because of grief and partially because I can't stop shaking. I'm forgetting simple tasks, yelling at coworkers. What is wrong with me? June 28th, 2010. I forgot where I put this journal. Everything is getting harder. My legs are practically immobile now. I can't stop crying. I've been to doctor after doctor and no one knows what's wrong. Why am I so sad? There's a letter on my desk, but I feel dread whenever I look at it. I quit my job. July 1st, 2010. I read the letter. Mom was more spiritual than I thought. She only cooked for a month after Dad died because the meat wasn't fresh afterwards. I feel sick. She and Dad had done this. It was never an aneurysm. I'm starting to forget what day it is, who I am. She killed me. I am dying and I can't even remember why. July 2nd, 2010. I quit my job. July 9th, 2010. I read the letter, or I tried to. My hands kept shaking and I couldn't focus on the words. I can't move anymore. What is wrong with me? Everything is getting harder. My legs no longer work and my throat is closing up. July 17th, 2010. I can't do this. There's nothing left. August 1st, 2010. Wow, my diary from when I was a kid. The rest of the journal is illegible scribbles. Any advice on how to proceed with the celebration of his life next week? Welcome, viewers, or listeners. This is a message recorded by Michael Rubin, the head of IPO, regarding the tape or transcript you are about to view or listen to. This is federal-level intelligence, not to be shared elsewhere, not even by word. Those who view or listen to the following media are legally bound to a non-disclosure agreement. Those who infringe upon this ruling will be pursued in the court of law by IPO and the government of the location of the viewer. This is an automated message. To those who may listen to this audio, be warned that it may cause distress or negative reaction out of individuals. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. This audio has been converted to a transcript for viewing purposes. Activity Log 1. This is Unit 14. Dr. Louise Bryce, recording Day 1's data and research log. I am Louise Bryce, born in Columbus, Ohio. I have a master's degree in marine biology, a bachelor's in biomechanics, alongside experience in working with new species and their discovery. I have been chosen carefully for this mission, which will be referred to as Project Sepnus. I am currently stationed in a habitat designed to withstand extreme pressure at the bottom of the Marina Trench. I am currently over 35,000 feet below the surface of the ocean, surrounded completely by darkness. The fall has lightly damaged the interior of my habitat, but will be repairable, and habitable nonetheless. This recording will be the end of Day 1 for me. I have been here for over 6 hours and am excited to explore the depths. The purpose of Project Sepnus is to explore and investigate the depths of the trench, hoping to discover new chemical and medical related properties along the way. Tomorrow is the beginning of a new dawn, the first time anyone will ever swim in water this deep. My equipment includes a temperature-powered hyper-bright flashlight, multiple tools for self-protection, as well as a collection of samples and a syntactic foam bodysuit. allowing me to withstand the pressures of the water around me. Updates will continue as follows. Day 2, Week 1, Month 1, Month 2, Month 3, and so forth, until I feel that my exploration has reached its limits. And communication. Activity Log 2. This is Unit 14. Dr. Louise Bryce recording Day 7's data and research log. The week has been rather eventful and has shown great potential in our discoveries. I explored the area surrounding me, including the hydrothermal vents scattered around my location. The location of the habitat is approximately 40 meters from the true depth of the trench. I am sitting at exactly 35,127 feet of depth, overlooking the maximum depth of 36,201. My area of exploration has proved fruitful to our expectations, verifying multiple hypotheses about the pressure's effect on minerals and organisms alike. I have discovered multiple new species of flora and fauna, which have proved to have extremely interesting ways of adapting to pressure and temperature change. Multiple flora have shown signs of developing defense mechanisms to prevent their own consumption from surrounding fauna. I am yet to receive any transmission for naming anything, but will refer to most flora and fauna by my own made-up and simplistic names for the time being. The most interesting of the flora would have to be what I will call botres. Botres take on an appearance like that of a sunflower, but with rather flashy colors, including multiple shades of neon variants with its bioluminescence. These flora have extremely short stems, with thick and strong roots clinging to the ocean floor below. None show signs of horizontal growth, gaining some sort of energy by facing the surface exclusively. These flora have an active defense system, working as a stabbing mechanism to any possible approaching predators. I have learnt the hard way upon approaching it and will continue to practice more safe approaches while examining these beings. The first fauna I have come across will be referred to as Warians. These passive, vegetarian faunas tend to stick to the ocean floor, feeding on the bacteria and microorganisms that live on it. These creatures are clearly the bottom feeders in this ecosystem, as I found their remains in multiple locations surrounding the habitat. These creatures have a transparent, membrane-like layer of skin covering basic organs and cartilage-like bones. Their skin is made to specifically avoid reflecting any light, allowing itself to hide from whatever preys on it. Before I end the communication, I'd also like to share my findings of something rather odd. When inspecting the hydro vents, a loud rumbling could be heard closer to the maximum depth and the cliff that overlooks it. I am completely unaware of its origin, but it can be heard in consistent pulses when near the edge. I will update the activity log on my findings as I progress through this ecosystem. End communication. Activity Log 3. This is Unit 14. Dr. Louise Bryce recording Day 30's data and research log. I have discovered multiple sets of organisms, and am beginning to form a full food chain for the trench. In brief explanations, I have found 3 different flora and 6 fauna. The 3 flora will remain nameless as they perform simple but surprisingly beneficial tasks. The 3 flora seem to convert nitrogen and sulfur into beneficial bacteria and nutrients through a filter-like function located in what appears to be an aquatic flower. I have gathered multiple samples of these unidentified nutrients, as well as taken seeds from each plant found. The fauna all have basic functions in this ecosystem, mostly playing the role of basic predator and prey. The most notable have been the only two predators found thus far. The first predator will be referred to as the Mary Shark, named after this trench. This predator uses its triangular fins to push itself off the ocean floor. The Mary Shark possesses a crimson and gray color, invulnerable to light and appearing in mixed patches over its thick body. This appearance and behavior are used to corner or attack fauna, using a goblin shark-like jaw to launch its short, barbed teeth at prey. This fauna has been found most commonly around the full length of 9 feet, and appears to be uninterested in my presence. I discovered this fauna as a carcass at first, clearly falling victim to a much bigger predator. The second predator discovered will be referred to as a sea raven. This ray-like predator sends gusts of water towards its prey in order to disorient it. It tends to swim wherever it feels fit, not sticking to a consistent location. This creature has also been seen laying eggs near different flora, not having any specific reproductive parts. To follow up on the pulses near the edge, the rumbling is beginning to grow louder. The depth of the noise itself is causing vibrations on the edge of the cliff, being the reasoning behind a near-death experience. As the rumbling grew louder, the structure below me began to crumble, nearly expelling me into the depth itself. I will continue to explore the cause of the rumbling and communication. Activity Log 4. This is Unit 14, Dr. Louise Bryce recording Day 60's data and research log. I have discovered multiple new flora of minor significance alongside 2 and a possible 3rd fauna. The rumbling has grown loud enough that I can hear it 30 feet away from the cliff, vibrating the flora around me. The habitat is beginning to grow multiple different species of flora on its exterior, which resulted in a requirement for basic maintenance in order to keep the lights going. Aside from adaptive flora, I've discovered something alarming yet intriguing. Across the cliff, I can see what appears to be a set of lights like mine, as well as a larger light hanging into the depth. The darkness shouldn't allow this, but it's clearly something worth exploring. Alongside the lights, the habitat surrounding are showing signs of possible human contact in the past. Multiple scratches and patterns can be found along the walls of the trench, showing odd signals and what could possibly be lettering. The 2 fauna discovered are both of a neutral hostility class, being omnivores as well as one showing the signs of mammal birthing patterns. This first new species of aquatic life could very well mean a source of cloning or reproductive revelations, and the creature is beautiful. The creature will be referred to as Hamas. With a tough height of scales, Hamas have a rather intimidating appearance, complete with short fangs and claw-like appendages in random numbers sprouting from the abdomen. The most appendages seen on an adult Hamas were what I have counted to be 13. These creatures can grow up to 26 feet long and are completely passive to my presence. The second fauna has... my apologies. It sounded as if something were knocking on the habitat. I'll just skip to the possible 3rd fauna. This creature was spotted swimming directly above the habitat upon returning from more exploration. It seemed to be directly hostile to anything around it, tearing the carcass of a sea raven to pieces. It made odd squeaking and rattle-like noises while eating, being larger than the habitat itself. For reference, the habitat is approximately 10 feet tall, with 2 rooms dedicated to my living and experiments. The creature sat on the experimental habitat, draping what appeared to be a thick tail over the window of the room. It had black coloring with spots of white along its hide, and could very well be over 80 feet long. I slowly approached the habitat, unaware of what could possibly happen upon being noticed. In regards to the lights across the cliff, they stand in the same location, still without any features. The rumbling has slowed its pace slightly, however, now sending visible ripples into the water above it. End communication. Activity Log 5. This is Unit 14. Dr. Louise Bryce recording Day 93's data and research log. It has been a rather eventful past month, with multiple happenings that could very well affect my own safety. Soon after recording last month's log, the habitat was blocked in by the creature I'd seen before. I have now seen its face, and can now confirm that this creature has to be the apex predator of this trench. After approaching the habitat, I hid from the view of the window and washed through my hiding spot as it appeared to investigate my location. The creature's face has a sloped, cylinder-like connection to its body, like that of an eel. Its face is composed of a massive mouth that extends in a humanoid way across the face, containing God knows how many teeth. The creature also showed some form of unorthodox senses, appearing to be listening or smelling with a large flap of skin extending around the base of its face, folding out into a direct sphere to possibly intimidate prey. Next to the two black eyes it possesses are two bioluminescent spots, appearing to even project an actual light into its surroundings. Needless to say, the creature poses a threat to my location and my own safety. I have limited some exploration due to this circumstance, but have done further discoveries on bacteria and other organisms. Upon taking fauna into the habitat, their forms have changed drastically. I have sent pictures through transmission and have received proper instruction on how to proceed with sampling. I have discovered some of the fauna to be edible, and some to even contain psychedelic effects on the human mind. Some of these effects are audible and visual hallucination, extreme visualization of surrounding audio, and basic disorientation. After consuming Warians, these effects have been present in myself. They wear off after about 7 hours, but leave for a hungover state, including headaches and body pain. The most common hallucinations experienced were lights passing through the windows, as well as knocking on the habitat. I am requesting immediate dismissal after I send my next transmission. End communication. Activity Log 6. This is Unit 14. Dr. Louise Bryce recording Day 94's data and research log. I have finished my exploration and am requesting extraction and dismissal from my post here. I have not received transmissions from IPO in over 2 weeks, and am unaware of the reasoning behind the lack of communication, but worry for my safety. I will be sending 2 more activity logs to ensure my extraction is in progress. Activity Log 7. This is Unit 14. Dr. Louise Bryce recording Day 95's data and research log. I still await extraction, but will continue to inform you of the happenings. I left the habitat soon after the last log and discovered something odd. 2 of the lights on the other side are now completely non-existent, only having the presence of the middle one left. Alongside this, the sudden intensity of the growling, knocking on habitat can be heard in distance. What the hell is that? I'm not just hearing things, am I? I could have sworn I heard some knocking from behind me. Regardless, the rumbling is now growing in intensity, and is beginning to show signs of a possible intelligent life form providing the source of it. The growling has been forming full words with Morse code, none having any significance to my location. I will send another activity log tomorrow, with a full record of the Morse code. Growling Morse code translating to abandoned. End communication. Activity Log 8. This is Unit 14. Dr. Louise Bryce recording day 96 data and research log. I yet again await extraction, but will continue to inform you of the happenings. The third light is now missing from across the depth. I am completely unaware of its whereabouts, but am beginning to grow paranoid about its connection to the growl. As I discovered the light going out, the Morse code began to become even faster. Upon the first day, I was able to record the following words and numbers. Grass needs 13 deceased market. I am completely unaware of the meaning behind the words, but more has been said and show meaning. Abandoned light deep, 13, 13, 13. The number 13 was repeated 3 times, alongside the numbers 1 through 14 being repeated 4 times. 2 of these words apply to the current situation, guaranteeing intelligent life forms creating these noises. Those words being light and deep. I will update you once more tomorrow, but that is if you're on your way. End communication. Activity log 9. This is Unit 14, and I'm starting to get really pissed off. Where the hell are you guys? You told me this was a 2-way mission, and I'm starting to think it was a load of bullshit. Look, I'm sorry to be rude here, but my safety is at risk. The lights are back again, but I'm not sure how. This time they are appearing far closer, almost as if they're floating over the cliff. They're fully visible from the window of the habitat, shining over the edge of the full depth. The growling has completely paused for some reason, and oh my god, what in the hell? The lights are gone again. They keep randomly disappearing without control. I'm in no mood to investigate, but I'll watch. Knocking can be heard from different spots of the habitat. Since this is an audio recording, you can't see what I'm seeing, but it's really weird. The lights are flickering in the habitat, but in a really weird way. Oh no. End communication. Activity log 10. This is Unit 14 requesting immediate help and extraction. It's staring through the window and hasn't moved all day. I've kept the lights off after the flickering and can only see because of the bioluminescence. Please come get me, I'm begging. Please send someone, please. Please, I'll do anything. I have a family. I just want to see my wife again. Help me. I just want to go home. Its lights went out and I don't know why. Please come help. The growling Morse code translates to left us, 13 abandoned. End communication. Activity log 11. This is Unit 14. It's now day 99. The creature is still in its same spot, waiting for me to do something. It knows I'm here. You rich assholes just send us in to do your dirty work. Tell us you'll bring us back out once we're done, but you lied. This was doomed from the beginning. You don't care about your workers. You leave us to die. I was supposed to help the world and share my findings, to revolutionize medicine. You goddamn liars. You lied to me. I'm gonna die down here. It heard me. I'm dead. It moved away from the habitat, but it's coming back. There's no doubt in my mind. The growling's back. It's saying something. It's saying 13 of us. What on earth does that mean? 13 of us. It's saying something else. Hold on. It said number 14. Number 14. Unit 14? Wait, 13 of us? It all makes sense now. I'm the 14th poor bastard you've sent down here, aren't I? Do you just wait for us to die and move on to the next candidate? You bunch of assholes think you run everything, don't you? I'm never getting out of here. Please just kill me. Come back already. I can't take it anymore. I've had it. What is that damned knocking noise? I'm going to the window. Oh my god. There are carcasses stacked outside of the habitat. That's what the knocking has been. Body parts. Human body parts. Unit 7. Unit 3. They're all here. It's come back. And then all that can be heard is crashing and screaming. Transcript ended. Please remove the disk. Transcript ended. Please remove the disk. A bit of backstory. I'm a 22-year-old university dropout. I lost my parents when I was 6 years old in an airplane accident. Or so my grandparents told me. I was never good at making friends and I was bullied in school. As such, I never had real friends. Everything changed when I started playing League of Legends back in 2014. There I had many friends, and they actually cared if I missed an opportunity to play with them. As time went on, they began forgetting about the game and me, and I was alone once again. That brings us to April 2020. I decided to drop out of university when the pandemic struck. We all had to stay in, which I didn't mind. I continued playing League of Legends. I thought that I was better staying inside. By November 2020, I had become severely depressed and alcoholic. All that loneliness had affected my mental health. This went on until May of 2022. It was then that I found an article about spiritualism and its benefits. I soon became obsessed with the paranormal. Late one night, I searched how I could communicate with the other side, and there it was. The Ouija board ritual. I wanted to try it out. Since I had no money though, I decided to go with my other method. I wrote all the letters on small pieces of paper, as well as the words yes and no. But then, I got scared and left it. Some days later, I was feeling depressed and had nothing to lose. Also, I could ask for happiness. Or so I thought. I went to my setup and started the seance. Is there anyone here with me? Yes. Do they know me? Yes. Do I know them? No. What is their name? Jonathan. Could he make sure that I won't be sad or depressed again? He paused. Yes. And that's where I decided to end it. I thanked Jonathan for being with me and went to sleep. For the next 3 weeks, I could actually communicate with Jonathan using the homemade Ouija board. I talked to him for most of my day, and he actually made me feel much better. The almost 2 years of depression were gone since I could openly speak with someone who wouldn't judge me and rather help me. As mid-June came by, though, I started noticing some weird things happening in my house. Stuff was missing or was in another place from where I had left it. I didn't notice at first because it was a small thing. What got me creeped out was that the small paper from my homemade Ouija board were on my desk spelling, "Not sad." I tried to communicate with Jonathan, but he wouldn't answer. Then I thought he had left and I got up in a hurry to search for some information on what to do. Once I sat on my chair and turned on my PC, I felt a painful scratch on my back. I jumped from my seat trying to find who it was, but I was alone once again. From then on, every time I was depressed or sad, I feel a painful scratch on my back, and a whisper is heard, but it's so low I can't understand what it says. Recently, my grandmother passed away, and when my grandmother told me, I wanted to cry so hard, but I couldn't. When my happiness turned to sadness, I started feeling 4 nails on my neck. I held my tears, although I couldn't. I can't be sad anymore. He does everything, so I'm not. But that means I'm in pain. When I'm feeling down, I'm feeling pain. He does everything to make me happy. Maybe he thinks we're friends. When I, 23 female, was 17, I was saving up for a backpacking trip and decided to get a second job. My dad happened to know a woman who owned a wedding venue and was looking for someone to do odd jobs around the property. For the sake of anonymity, we will call the woman Megan. From the moment I met Megan, I loved her. Truly, she was an amazing boss. I had absolutely no experience with any of the things she asked me to do, and looking back, I was a slow and, in my opinion, useless employee. However, she paid me extremely well and really liked me, tending to the garden, babysitting her 5-year-old daughter, feeding the horses, painting fences, talking down brides, having a mental breakdown. I was up for anything. Except when it came to the guest house. The guest house was a beautiful new building situated above the horse stables. The bridesmaids and bride-to-be would stay there the night before the wedding, and the night the bride and groom would stay there, they could look out the window and see the shimmering pond and the horses grazing in the field while eating a huge fresh breakfast that Megan would make with eggs from the chickens and veggies from the garden. It was truly beautiful. Yet, every time I was sent to clean after they left, I was paralyzed with fear. All my life, I have been a very independent person who prefers to be on my own, so this kind of job is right up my alley. But from the first moment I stepped in there, I got an acute feeling that something wasn't right. The best comparison I can think of is when you are out alone, and a man approaches you, and he has this hungry look in his eyes like he wants something. And you get a sinking feeling in your gut, and a heartbeat in your ears, and you suddenly feel very exposed. I tried to shake this feeling off. Honestly, I felt embarrassed. This was such a beautiful, bright guest house with all new furnishings. There was nothing creepy about it at all. But the longer I stayed, the worse it got. The worst of all was the bathroom. Because when I scrubbed the bath, my back was to the door, and I could feel something behind me. Goosebumps would cover my arms and my heart would race, but every time I turned around, there would be nothing there. I would clean as fast as I could, but that presence behind me was so strong it felt suffocating. I know it might sound crazy, but I was not alone. Something was watching me, and whatever it was, did not like me. Every week, the feeling got stronger. I began to dread coming into work. I had nightmares, but I never told Megan. How could I? I never actually saw anything scary in the guest house. One time in particular, when I was cleaning the tub, the feeling got so bad that I whipped around and ran as fast as I could down the stairs and outside. I stood out there gasping for breath. I felt like I had almost died, even though really, nothing had happened at all. When my backpacking trip approached, and I handed in my notice, Megan asked to take me out to dinner. We had a great time talking about some of the crazy weddings we had that summer, and then she suddenly got serious. She said that now that I was leaving, she had to tell me something. She told me that I lasted the longest out of anyone she'd ever known cleaning the guest house. I went completely still and asked her why. She said that in the past 2 years, since the venue has been opened, she has had many strange complaints about the guest house. Megan's best friend used to clean it, but would only do it with her husband, claiming that it terrified her for a reason she couldn't explain. She also had a bride and groom say that the venue was lovely, but there was something very negative in the guest house. Worst of all, Megan told me she once had someone leave in the middle of the night. They told her they couldn't sleep because something was there with them. I was floored. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Suddenly all the months I had spent feeling embarrassed and crazy became something else entirely. I told her how terrified I had been, how scared I was to come to work, and she apologized profusely, which I appreciated because honestly, I was a little peeved she didn't tell me before. She said that she hadn't believed in any supernatural stuff until this guest house, and I couldn't help but agree with her. She promised to deal with the problem, I didn't know how she would do that, but wished her luck. When I came back from backpacking 4 months later, Megan asked to meet with me. I had been itching for an update about the guest house, and I think she could sense that. She told me after I left, she called someone to come assess the situation. Honestly, I still don't know much about supernatural things, so I don't know the right title for what this lady was, but I guess she's a well-known spiritual woman in our town who people have gone to for this sort of stuff. I guess she went into the guest house and immediately pointed to the vanity in the powder room. The powder room and the bathroom sit directly across from one another. I realized that when I cleaned the bathtub and felt that presence behind me, it was the vanity, which was the only thing within my eye line each time I turned around. Megan told me she got the vanity at an estate sale, and it had been in the guest house since the venue first opened. She said that the lady told her it was the most powerful spiritual force she had ever worked with, and asked that Megan destroy the vanity immediately, which she did. She also later told Megan that the spirit followed her home and attacked her and tried to possess her, but I'm only mentioning that briefly because A, despite what I experienced, I don't really believe that, and B, Megan didn't tell me much about it. Since the vanity was destroyed, Megan tells me that she hasn't had any more issues or complaints with the guest house, but now she's super into spiritual stuff, which she wasn't before. Before this happened to me, I would scoff at these kinds of stories or explain them away, but nothing can ever explain the way I felt in that guest house. Now, whenever someone tells me, or I read a creepy story, I pause before dismissing it, and think about those times where my whole body was immobilized with fear, which at the time was seemingly no reason at all. The following documents have been compiled together in an attempt to present a clearer picture of the unusual events leading to the abandonment of Stevensville, Colorado on July 18, 1987. The official explanation of the town's evacuation is an underground coal fire caused due to an unusually destructive and highly localized earthquake. With this evidence, I hope to change that perception. Newspaper clipping from the Stevensville Herald, April 17, 1987. McClintock coal mine digging new shaft. The McClintock coal mine is digging a new shaft sometime in the next month. Victor Briggs, the mine's foreman, states, "The company has been looking to expand for some time now. The other shafts are no longer yielding as much coal, and increasing mechanization has been resulting in layoffs. Julian McClintock believes the best solution is to start a new shaft. Some recent geological surveys have hinted there may be vast wealth of coal at the proposed location of Shaft 8. This expansion will bring in dozens of new jobs, something that this town desperately needs." Others, however, have less positive opinions on this development. A new mine shaft means more pollution and a greater reliance on fossil fuels, claims Diana Schneider, chairwoman of the Thomas County Conservation Society. "Our greed is destroying our planet. Just look at what has happened to Lark's Creek due to runoff from the mines already. We need to think about what kind of world our children are going to inherit." Mayor Mitchell has responded to the recent criticism, explaining, "We need to focus on our citizens, not a bunch of trees. These environmentalists don't understand that we need jobs more than we need a scenic view. If Miss Schneider is so concerned about the world our children are going to inherit, she should consider whether an impoverished child would rather have a pleasant view or food to eat." Julian McClintock, owner of the McClintock coal mine, could not be reached for comment. Newspaper clipping from the Stevensville Herald, May 10, 1987. Geologist baffled over recent earthquakes. Dr. Catherine Hendricks of the Thomas County Geological Institute is unable to explain the recent quakes that seem focused around Stevensville. It just doesn't make sense, says Hendricks. It doesn't line up with any of the geological information we have for this area, and the seismograph data is just bizarre. The quakes, which started earlier this week, have all been unusually powerful for this region, measuring an average of 4.6 on the Richter scale. While no injuries have been reported, the quakes have resulted in some noticeable shaking and loud rumbling. County authorities advise that residents of Stevensville should pack up and secure easily damaged valuables until further notice. Diary entry of Ronald Winsom, June 3rd, 1987. I've been moved over to work on Shaft 8 today. I don't really mind. It's mostly the same work I've been doing for a while now, though some of the equipment is a bit newer. Management was right. There is a lot more coal in this area, and it seems of much higher quality as well. I'm always looking forward to the pay boost. More money for the same work is always nice. The only thing that bugs me are two of the new workers. I think their names are Jim and Robert. There is just something off about them. They work the machines just fine, of course. Excellent, even. But they don't talk much, and they always have these stupid grins on their faces. Whenever I try to make conversation while we work, they just give me this blank stare and idiotic smile, like they're looking right through me. I thought maybe it was just me, but I asked my buddy Charlie about it, and they seem freaky to him too. Maybe they're on something. I don't know. I might bring it up with Victor. Diary entry of Ronald Winsom, June 4th, 1987. I spoke to Victor today, and the strangest thing happened. The conversation started out completely ordinary. Nothing seemed unusual. He asked me about the wife, how I was doing, etc. But when I brought up Jim and Robert, his eyes went blank and he got the same stupid smile on his face. He just said something like, "Oh, don't mind them. They're just a bit shy is all. There's nothing to worry about." I tried to elaborate and he just repeated the exact same words, same tone, verbatim. I left it at that and didn't press the issue. If I'm being honest with myself, it chilled me to the bone. He sounded like a different person, like some sort of machine instead of a flesh and blood man. Just thinking about it gives me the creeps. I mentioned it to Charlie, and he thought it was really weird. He thinks it might be some sort of bizarre prank or something, but I don't know. Diary entry of Ronald Winsom, June 5th, 1987. I don't know if I can take much more of this. There is something deeply, terribly wrong happening here. Charlie is acting different now too. I've been working with this guy for years. I was excited when he got transferred over to Shaft 8 with me, happy to see a familiar face. But now he has the same stupid smile and blank-eyed stare as Jim and Robert. He didn't even seem to recognize me when I said hi to him earlier. I hope this is just some stupid prank. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Diary entry of Ronald Winsom, June 8th, 1987. I quit today. I just can't take it anymore. I got back from the weekend hoping everyone would just be done with this joke, but it's gotten even worse. Jim got his hand caught in the threads of one of the diggers. He nearly got his whole arm torn off. I've seen accidents like this before. It wasn't the flesh tearing or blood spurting that's got me shaken. It was how he reacted. He just stared blankly ahead, smiling like a moron. Not so much as a flinch as the machine ripped half his arm off. I put in my resignation at the end of my shift. I told them it was a 2 weeks notice, but I'm not coming in there again. I saw that same grin on Victor as I told him I was going. The same blankness in his eyes. What the hell is going on? Letter from Dr. Jeremy Hopkins to his brother, Andrew Hopkins, June 9th, 1987. Andy, I'm writing to you today because I just need to get something off my chest. You've always been someone I can talk to when things have been rough, and I really can't deal with the idea of bottling this up. We had a patient wheeled into the ER yesterday. He had gotten his arm torn off in a mining accident. I'll spare you the gory details. I know you don't have much of a stomach for that stuff. Needless to say, the poor bastard was in a sorry state by the time we got to him. He had lost quite a bit of blood. We weren't sure he'd make it. Now you know me, Andy. I'm not going to get all riled up over something as simple as a severed limb, but that's not what bothered me. It was the fact this man showed absolutely no signs of stress or shock whatsoever. He was just sort of smiling, blankly, nothing behind his eyes, but strangely it didn't seem like he was in any sort of catatonic state or anything like that. He looked around, even responded to questions, always speaking in a calm sort of voice. That damn smile never left his face. Weirder still, sedatives didn't seem to work on him. We wanted to try and put him under, but the IV did nothing. I triple-checked the needle. It was fine. No problem with the bag, either. I even had the nurses change out the medicine just to see if we accidentally gave him mislabeled saline, but it didn't matter. He just wouldn't fall unconscious. He kept staring at us as we worked to clean up the wound and stop the bleeding. After he was stable, I gave him a proper examination. I wanted to take a look at his head, see if there was any trauma there that could account for the utterly bizarre lack of pain or inability to fall unconscious. He bit me when I tried to. No change in that stupid smile or blank doll eyes. Just jerked his head toward me and bit me on the arm when I tried to. After I finally got him off me and had the nurses tie him down and attempt to anesthetize him, but obviously that didn't work, he just kept smiling and staring, even as he thrashed against the bonds. We had to basically tie him down to get a good look at him, not that he ever stopped struggling. I finally did get a closer look at his head, and what I found puzzled me immensely. It was very faint, but around the circumference of his head was a thin white scar all the way around, like how a cartoon might depict someone getting brain surgery by just having the top of their head pulled off like the lid of a box. I barely even noticed it at first. It was so faint. It's hard thinking about what happened next. If I knew it would have turned out this way, I never would have done what I did. I wanted to get a good look at his brain, figure out what happened, if he would need surgery. We prepped the MRI machine and strapped him in. He just kept smiling and staring blankly ahead. Gave no warning or anything. He didn't say anything at all when we pushed him into the machine. Didn't say anything as we flipped on the switch. He only started talking after it was too late. It was only once the machine started that he began screaming. He started shouting for help, begging us to stop. Then he said the words that will haunt me to the day I die. He shouted, "They put something in my head." I tried to shut it off. I swear I did everything right. But I must have got so panicked I fumbled just a little too long. I know it's impossible, but it almost felt as if the machine was fighting back. I watched in horror as I saw his flesh start to writhe as if full of worms, his veins bulging as his eyes darted around. It could only have been a few seconds, but for me, time seemed to pass like molasses. There was a sudden sense of calm on the patient's face, and then his head exploded, showered blood and bits of brain all over the insides of the machines. Scattered among the gore were dozens of intricate pieces of metal, rapidly clumping into flat discs of metal under the intense magnetic force. I'm sorry. I know I said I wouldn't go into details, but I just had to tell someone. The official explanation is that the patient had some shrapnel in his head that was previously unreported. I can't believe that. I didn't get too good of a look at whatever was inside his head before they were flattered, but it didn't seem like any shrapnel I've ever seen. In addition, there is no record of the patient ever serving in the military, and any severe enough injury to leave that much metal inside his skull would surely be recorded somewhere. Someone did this to him. I've been given 2 weeks off for my mental health. I was hoping I could come visit you and Christine. I think I need to see some familiar faces after this experience. I'm sorry. Yours, Jeremy. Transcript of an interview with Dr. Natasha Albertson of the canceled TV show Bizarre Mysteries. Conducted January 13th, 2003. Interviewer is Arthur Dennings. Arthur. So, Miss Albertson, we understand that you had an unusual experience with an autopsy in 1987. Natasha. That's why I'm here, aren't I? Arthur. Why don't you tell us what happened? Natasha. Well, that's a bit easier asked than answered, but I'll do my best. It was, if I had to guess, June 28th when I became directly involved. About a week or two earlier, a miner by the name of Roger Ainsley never returned home from the mine. According to his partner, he had been acting strangely for several days beforehand. Roger had been seeming to forget how to do basic tasks, smiling strangely at inopportune moments, and sometimes just stared at the walls for hours, seeming not to blink. His partner had considered getting him to see professional help, but as they were a gay couple in the 80s, that wasn't really an option for them. So he just hoped it would pass on its own and tried to do his best to take care of him. Then one day he just never came back after work. No explanation, no note, no nothing. He just didn't come back. From what I was told, security cameras didn't pick him up leaving the mine either. It was as if he just vanished. Arthur. Did Roger Ainsley have any history of mental illness or anything like that? Natasha. Nope, none at all. He was considered by all who knew him to be mentally sound. He had no history of depression, schizophrenia, anxiety, nothing. He occasionally had a drink or a cigarette after his shift at the mine, but nothing that would count as an addiction. And as near as anyone could tell, he'd never taken any form of illicit substances. He just started acting weird out of the blue, and then vanished. Arthur. And how did you come into the picture? Natasha. Well, after a few days of no contact, Roger's boyfriend called the police. Of course they found nothing. They suspected he fled town or something similar, and didn't put a lot of effort into the search. Not a lot of sympathy for folks like us back then. Anyway, after a week or two, he just turned up out of the blue at the edge of the woods, stark naked and barely breathing. The kids who found him took Roger to the hospital, but by the time they got him there, the poor guy had already passed away. Now at the time I worked as the pathologist at the Thomas County Hospital, so it was my job to perform an autopsy on him. I didn't have any knowledge of who he was at the time, since I didn't live in Stevensville, and word hadn't really gotten around yet. To me, he was just another John Doe. Arthur. What did you find? Natasha. Nothing at first. Not a mark on him beyond some scratches and whatnot, consistent with what someone wandering naked in the woods would have. He seemed a bit malnourished and dehydrated, but not too bad to have died. My thought at the time was an overdose of some kind. Given how he was found, that was my working theory until I took a look at his skull. Arthur. What was wrong with his skull? Natasha. There was a faint scar around the whole cranium, almost unnoticeable unless you were checking very closely. It was way too precise to have been made with any of the technology at the time, unless somehow this working class coal miner had gotten highly experimental treatment that I hadn't heard about. I was at a loss, but it seemed to me almost as if it was some sign of brain surgery, so I did what any self-respecting pathologist would do. I opened up his skull. Arthur, what did you find? Natasha. Nothing. Arthur, you mean his brain seemed normal? Natasha. No, I mean there was nothing in there. His skull was empty. Newspaper clipping from the Stevensville Herald, July 3rd, 1987. Environmentalist group sues McClintock mine. The Thomas County Conservation Society announced plans this past Wednesday to sue the McClintock coal mine over alleged violations of the Clean Water Act. I've been out there by Larks Creek just yesterday, said Deanna Schneider, chairwoman of the TCCS. All of the fish out there are horribly sick, and the water is this horrible purplish black color. I can't believe that nothing has been done sooner. When reached for comment, Julian McClintock, owner of the McClintock coal mine, said in a letter to the press, I understand the concern of the TCCS, but there is nothing wrong. I personally invite Miss Schneider to visit our facility. I am sure it will put her mind at ease. Newspaper clipping from the Stevensville Herald, July 7th, 1987. Environmentalist group retracts lawsuit. Diana Schneider, chairwoman of the Thomas County Conservation Society, issued a public statement Sunday retracting her previous vow to sue the McClintock coal mine. I've done a personal inspection of the facility, and there is no pollution of any sort. The facility is remarkably clean and environmentally friendly. There is nothing wrong. I apologize for misleading the public on this issue. Transcript from a broadcast of the radio show. Richard Ellison's Haunted America, July 10th, 1987. Alright folks, up next we have a caller by the name of Alice Hartford from Stevensville, Colorado, here to relate her experiences living in a haunted house. Alice. Thank you, Richard. I'm just so happy to be able to talk to someone about this. Richard. The pleasure is all mine, Miss Hartford. So tell me, when exactly did your troubles begin? Alice. Well, I'm not exactly sure, but I first noticed something was wrong on the 4th of July, just under a week ago. My family and a couple friends were celebrating with a barbecue in the backyard. Well, the beer had started to run dry, so I just popped down into the basement to get some. We kept it down there to make sure my daughter doesn't see it lying around and mistake it for some pop. And then, well, you'll think I'm crazy. Richard. Trust me, Alice. Whatever happened, you can tell me. My listeners and I make sure to keep an open mind about these things. Alice. Well, I started to hear voices. I couldn't understand anything the voices were saying. It definitely wasn't English. Just sort of strange sounds, but it was certainly a voice. Why I panicked so badly? Worried there were burglars. I ran all the way up the stairs and out of the house and told Mark to get down there. Richard. Mark is your husband? Alice. Yes, I'm sorry. I should have mentioned that. Richard. It's quite all right. Please continue, Mrs. Hartford. Alice. He obliged me, even took that damn rifle of his which scares me so much, but the voices had stopped by the time he was down there. I was sure I was going crazy. As a matter of fact, it wasn't until 2 days later that I became convinced I didn't just imagine it. Richard. Oh? And why was that? Alice. Well, it was probably midday. Mark was off at work and my daughter Jessica was at school. I was heading into the basement to put in a load of laundry when I heard those voices again. For a moment I was worried I was losing my mind, but I had an idea. I quickly set down the laundry and ran to Mark's office. He keeps a tape recorder there, you know, to take notes when he brings work home. Anyway, I bring it with me back to the basement and start recording. I was sure that if the recording could be heard afterwards that I wasn't going nuts. And it worked. Richard, do you still have this recording? Alice, yes, just a moment. There are sounds of fiddling with the tape recorder, followed by harsh whispers in an unknown language. The voices simultaneously sound nearby and distant at the same time. After this point, the recording degenerates into a high-pitched screech, followed by a thudding sound. The tape recorder clicks, and the recording ends. Richard, what were those sounds at the end of the recording, Mrs. Hartford? Alice, frankly, I'm not sure. I seem to have blacked out around then. When I woke up, it was about 3 hours later, and I was lying face up in the basement. I had a nasty bump on the back of my head, so I figured I fell down the stairs. Richard, have you heard the voices since? Alice, yes, nearly every night. I've tried to tell my husband, but... Richard, he doesn't believe you? Alice, I'm not sure. I've tried to tell him. I've even shown him the recording once or twice, but he just doesn't seem to process the words. He just goes silent and smiles blankly until I change the subject. He doesn't seem to understand that he does it. That isn't the worst part, though. Richard, why? What else happened? Alice, I told you I hear those voices every night, and I mean that. But I haven't been purposefully going down to the basement every night, Mr. Ellison. I just keep waking up there, as if I've been sleepwalking. I seem to wake up right before something dreadful will happen, because the voices keep sounding frustrated whenever I do. Once I even swore I saw something down there with me, and I still can't get it out of my head. Richard, tell me what you saw. Alice, it was hard to see in the dark, but it was short, maybe about 4 feet tall. It looked human in outline, more or less, but the proportions were all wrong. The limbs seemed thinner than they should be, and the head was far too large for its neck. The main thing I could make out were its eyes, these horrible, soulless eyes that reflected the light coming from the open basement door. It seemed to panic when I noticed it, and then suddenly I was back in my bed, with a horrible bruise on my temple. I must have hit my head on my way back to bed. That was only last night. I'm horrified to think what will happen tonight. Anonymous letter sent to the 14 magazine. Unknown Phenomena. January 7th, 1993. To the editor. I was reading the article about underground coal fires from last February's issue, and I must protest. What happened in Stevensville on July 18th, 1987 was not a coal fire. At least, not entirely. I'm no geologist, nor can I say I have much knowledge of the mining industry at large, but there is no doubt in my mind that there was something more going on. I remember waking up that night to the sounds of screams. I ran outside to see what was happening, and was greeted to a scene right out of hell. I saw dozens, maybe hundreds of people marching up towards the McClintock coal mine. Each of them was carrying another person, someone who was struggling to escape. They all marched in unison, staring straight ahead, smiling an inhuman artificial grimace which I hope to God I never see again. The people in their arms were begging to be let go, pleading to be put down. I saw one smiling marcher had both his eyes torn out by the prisoner he was carrying, but all he did was keep smiling and walking like a goddamn robot. You ever see a bunch of ants moving in a straight line? Looking at them was just like that. At some point, a police officer ran up to me and started explaining that there was a coal fire. that I had to get out of there. Smoke was pouring out of the ground, and my vision started to get a bit hazy. I asked him why those people were being carried up to the mine, and he just looked at me with blank eyes and a mechanical smile and said, "Everything is fine. It is all going to be okay." I got the hell out of there as soon as I could. I was worried that if I stayed, I'd get taken away too. I think I woke up too early. I don't think I was meant to see what I saw. I only started to hear sirens and police announcements via megaphone as I was leaving town. The worst part wasn't the strange police officer, or the awful marchers, or hell, even the whole damn town being evacuated. It was the thing I saw following the marchers up the hill. I only caught glimpses, but I swear, I saw something else walking alongside them. Like I said, I didn't get a clear look. It was dark and smoky, and I was half asleep, but I know I saw it. It stood about the height of a child, and dressed in funny clothes, like the kind of uniform you'd see on one of those science fiction shows. I didn't get a clear look at its head, but I could see shiny black eyes and pale white skin. The thing moved wrong, as though it didn't have the same muscles and bones that we had. It vanished into the crowd after I got distracted by the eyeless marcher, but I swear I saw it. I swear it was real. Everyone I've tried to talk to about this just thinks I was hallucinating from the smoke, but I know what I saw was real. I don't care if y'all believe me or not. That is for the readers to decide for themselves. But I'll be damned if I get this swept under the rug. People have got to know. This final document is rather unusual. It is the most coherent entry from a journal kept by an unidentified individual who identified only as 251. 251 was found unconscious and unresponsive near the entrance of a Denver subway station on August 12, 1992. Following her recovery, 251 became homeless, unable to retain a job due to her mental illness. She died under unknown circumstances in a shelter on December 2nd, 1995. The extensive loss of public records owing to devastating earthquake of July 18th means that it is impossible to verify if 251 is a former resident of Stevensville, but her journal seems to support this conclusion. Most of the journal is unintelligible, consisting of strange symbols, scribbles, doodles, and strings of numbers and letters, but the entry below is relatively readable, if bizarre. Spelling and capitalization errors have been partially corrected for ease of reading. Journal entry of the individual known as W251, date unknown. My name, they took away my name. Carved it out and chopped it up and dissected it and put something else in instead. Something metal and hard and sharp that I feel slicing my memories like a surgeon's scalpel. 251 is number, designation, identity, differentiation. 251 was unimportant. Only the work I could perform for the sunless ones was important. They are known by many names, Darrow and Kobold and Gray. But to me they are the sunless ones, for they hide from the sun like skittering, silverish, scuttling away from a dangling light bulb, hiding away in the hollow place. Came up through the mines, first using radio waves and thought particles and whispers in the ear of the owner. His designation became 001, first of the ones they took. They had to leave him mostly intact, undamaged, because if others knew what they did, their plan would be for nothing. So they came to him in dreams and visions and sounds, and he dug to them. He went down into the earth and pulled them out from the hollow place like they were coal. The miners they took first needed total compliance, complete control. Sliced out their souls and put in machinery and wires and radio. Partial conversions were best. The full conversions didn't fool anybody. Sometimes they'd just take out everything for fun and see how long they could last. Nobody cared. Nobody knew. The police were already quiet from the machines they had in their heads. Scars so small you could barely see them unless you were looking. I have one too. It was 7181987. They came up from the ground to complete their quota, going too slow and they needed builders and guinea pigs. Cut off all the phones and scrambled the radios and dug their way up. Had to be night, the sun burns the pale eggshell skin of the sunless ones. The already converted helped grab the rest. They did not need everybody, only needed a third. The rest could burn or run and it did not matter. I was taken down, down, down into the mine by the other converted and processed. Scooped out old memories and put in rules and protocols and small ticking noises that prevented sleep. I worked and worked and worked for days and days and days. The sunless ones poked and prodded and laughed in the horrible, tittering way of the hollow place. Given slurry to eat and drink just enough to keep alive to operate the machines. I could not think. They took that part out and put in a transceiver just above the left eye. It was near one of the machines when I broke, when the transceiver failed. Pressing the right buttons at the right times for hours and hours. A nanosecond delay was not permissible. Punished by pain. Shovel the dead into the machine. But something went wrong and the machine failed. It was so old. Ancient prehistoric old, older than us by infinite magnitudes. A blast of rays and magnetism, and the brain in my head was shattered like glass. I was free to scream and cry and think and love and kill. I killed a sunless one. I bashed its bulbous head against the hard, cold rock until the warm, sour blood spilled like yolk from an egg, and its cold black eyes were dead and still. I took the pain box and left to climb the miles-high exit shaft into the building light of the upper world. I was free. Now I am broken and unable to be repaired. The right parts are missing miles and miles below the ground. There are entrances in the subways and the elevators and the forgotten sub-basements, but I am free, and I will never go back. I just wish I still had my name. Despite requests for its release, 251's autopsy report has not been made available. In addition, the so-called pain box device, which 251 obsessively clung to throughout the final years of her life, was found to be missing from police evidence. Of the 1,348 former inhabitants of Stevensville, Colorado, 447 remain unaccounted for. The entire town is abandoned and forgotten, save as an actual inclusion on a list of ghost towns. The documents above are all that remains to indicate anything unusual beyond a simple coal fire ever occurred. Perhaps some things truly are better left buried. I never thought I'd be one of the people to write a story here, to share something horrible. I actually never used to read Reddit or anything like that. I don't even like horror stories, but my mother loves everything scary. She decorates her house for Halloween in August. She watches slashers like they're her stories. I guess I started reading these stories to try and engage in her hobby. It never really clicked, but I tried. My mom was always interested in this stuff though. When true crime became bigger during the pandemic, she eagerly started watching every YouTube channel she could find. I'd wake up in the mornings at 8 a.m. to the words throat slashed or eyes gouged out or stabbed 44 times. I was 18 and I had heard my mother say exsanguination more often than she'd said I love you. I know that sounds dramatic, but not only is it true, it's frighteningly relevant. I saw less and less of the woman who had raised me, and more of an empty shell with nothing to fill her but the horrible words coming from our TV at all hours. My dad wasn't in the picture. He hadn't been for over 10 years, for reasons I won't get into. But I know he was depressed. It was just me, my mom, and the TV. Once, when I had managed to drag her out to a doctor's appointment, I joked that the TV was my new dad. She'd just looked at me with her tired eyes, no anger or humor, and I didn't say anything about it again. I began to wish for her to get angry at me, to do something, to feel again. I regret that now. The thing about true crime, beyond the obvious that it's true, is that most of the cases that get sensationalized are unsolved. I read somewhere that there are as many as 50 active serial killers in the US at any given time. Of course, that means a lot of them don't get reported at all. But the ones that do, and the ones that aren't solved, get turned into televised candy for bored housewives. Exactly a month ago today, I woke up to my mom doing the same thing she did every morning, drinking her coffee and watching a video on YouTube. "Hey Mom," I said, expecting no response. It was almost startling when she snapped her head towards me and grinned. "Hey Em," she said, cheerful. It was the most emotion I'd heard in almost 2 years, and I admit I was a bit nervous by the sudden change. "You want to watch this with me?" she asked, gesturing at the television with her coffee mug. I'd bought it for her a few years ago. It said, "Number 1 cat, Grandma." A stupid joke, and an upsetting one. My cat had run away a few months ago. But I can't pretend that I wasn't also a little happy to finally be invited into this secret world my mother languished in. She wasn't antisocial, but I wouldn't say she liked talking during her stories. Maybe a few comments here or there, but mostly to herself. I sat on the couch. Instead of continuing the video, my mother clumsily navigated the Roku remote control and began a new one. A glance at the video info said it had been posted around midnight, 8 or so hours ago. She patted my leg awkwardly as the video began. I smiled a little weakly and then focused on the TV. I was honestly confused by her enthusiasm. She practically vibrated with emotion as we watched the opening scroll. It was the usual stuff, the name of the channel, then the name of the episode, and a few words about Patreon. On the bottom left, a little pop-up about paid promotions being in the video slid into the screen, and I felt my eyes glaze over. Yes, I'd tried to engage with my mother before, but I can't say I was thrilled about this. The voice on the screen had a dead, utilitarian sound. Subtitles were on despite the words themselves already gliding across the screen. I recognized Windows Movie Maker style transitions and almost laughed. "Today's story is pretty unique to the channel," says the man's voice. "Most of the cases we discuss on here are old, cold cases, but today's is as fresh as a daisy." It was a bit strange to hear someone talk about what was probably a terrible crime, that it was the latest fashion, but I digress. He continued. In the sleepy town of Caston, Maine, a gruesome scene was discovered on May 12th. I stopped. Caston? Is that why my mom wanted me to watch? It was the town next to ours, only a few miles drive to the west. I must have made a face. My mom turned to me with a huge grin, nodding her head and never quite meeting my eyes. 2 homeless men were found dead, their throats cut, their bodies stashed in a dumpster behind a local grocery store. The funny thing is, the killer obviously had trouble getting the bodies in there. They built a makeshift stairway with old pallets. No DNA was found at the scene, beyond the victims, which honestly was everywhere. The killer rolled them up the stairs like old rugs. On the screen, an amateurish recreation of the scene drawn in Photoshop popped up for a moment. Then, "All right," said the voice. "Here's a message from today's sponsors." I turned to my mom. She still looked thrilled to be sitting there watching it with me. She had more color in her cheeks than she had in over a year. Her blonde hair, streaked with gray, was brushed and pulled into a fancy bun. She'd stuck a blue pin through her hair. It was a dragonfly styled in faw-stained glass. I'd gotten it for her on her 50th birthday. There had been a real sapphire tucked away among the blue and white painted glass. It had fallen out, but the hairpin itself was still beautiful. The blue in her gray blonde hair added made her look 10 years younger. After the sponsorship spiel was over, we finished the video. It was pretty cut and dry. The only real shock was that it had happened so close to our house. The police had no leads, and the video ended up with a number to call in case there was any info. "So?" my mom said. "What did you think?" I said not really sure what to say. It was kind of scary that something like that could happen so close to us. I know those guys were homeless, but that doesn't mean it isn't awful. "What's awful about it?" my mom asked with a bitter note. 2 people died, Mom." "Oh." She perked up again and smiled. After that, we ordered pizza and watched a movie. She let me pick, which meant it was the first non-horror film I'd watched with my mom ever. After that, things went back to mostly normal. I still woke up at 8 a.m. to the sounds of true crime on the TV, but there was a small difference. My mom would ask me questions about the videos. I'd sit, laptop on my legs, and job application after job application on my screen. And she'd ask me if I thought the killer might get caught, or if he or she was smart enough to elude police, if fingerprint evidence was enough to catch someone. I didn't really know, but even though it was still about her hobby, I responded. I even felt myself starting to get into it. It was almost like a soap opera. Even though you knew the content was bad, it sucked you in. Until tonight. I'm writing this from the bathroom. My mom thinks the food we ordered didn't sit well with me, but the truth is that I'm fine, at least physically. I had decided to actually start watching the videos ahead of time, so I could answer her questions, get more info and gain some knowledge about this hobby of hers. I reasoned it wasn't her fault she was bored. It wasn't her fault she was retired and the world had gone mad and there was a pandemic. I'd loaded up the video as soon as it popped up. The same channel that had started this whole mess. Windows Movie Maker, a pop-up telling me there was a paid promotion, and 2 more bodies. More homeless men. The voice on the screen had more pep to it. He was happy that there were now 4 bodies. You need 3 kills for it to be a serial. The cops were still pretty dumbfounded, but they had a small lead. The killer had possibly left behind some evidence, and the YouTuber was thrilled to have procured a picture. Legally, he swore, but I rolled my eyes. As the image slid onto the screen, I felt my stomach fall. It was a small plastic baggie. Picture taken by an inexpert hand, probably with a phone. Inside, a tiny sapphire, glue still encrusted on the side where it had fallen from its setting. Help me. When I was little, we lived in the apartment right above my grandfather's shop. He was a tailor who, according to Dad, used to do quite well back in the day, before fines forced him to shut down. Something to do with the IRS and unaccounted revenue. My poor grandfather was beside himself. I overheard Dad telling Uncle Eddie that their father was just too old to keep up with the place, and too stubborn to give it up. Now the once thriving staple of their childhood sat fully stocked and lifeless. Dad was forced to find other work, running through a string of jobs before settling for a sales position at some insurance company downtown. He hated it, and so did Mom. She became miserable over our new lifestyle. She started drinking a lot, something even my young mind had picked up on. Then Dad caught her cheating and, rather than trying to save the family, she decided to run off with the new guy. It was strange how fast everything had changed. One night, Mom was singing me to sleep, and the next, I was all alone. Dad did what he could, but he too was in pain and unable to truly explain to his 6-year-old daughter what was going on. That was when the night terrors started. I'd wake to the sound of someone screaming, this bone-chilling screech that would pierce through my own shrieks from under the blankets where I'd hide. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of a woman standing in the corner of my bedroom, staring at me from behind a curtain of long, dark hair, mouth agape. It sent me into hysterics. My dad's hurried arrival would soon become a tired routine, his frustration less subtle each time he listened to me rant on about the scream lady. He tried assuring me that my mind was making me see and hear things that weren't there, all because I missed Mommy so much. He said that sometimes the things that make us sad on the inside had a way of coming out. This, of course, did nothing to make the screamy lady go away. She'd show up again and again, just as I was falling asleep. The neighbors must have hated me, and for a while I worried that my dad might too. Between the shop closing, my mother leaving, my grandfather's steady decline, and the struggle to make ends meet, my dad was already going through enough. I didn't want to add to it, and I knew that I was. Dad wasn't sure what to do with me, nor was Uncle Eddie, who was kind enough to babysit from time to time so his brother could work the second job he so desperately needed. Therapy was too expensive. We tried changing my diet, changing my bedtime, leaving the lights on. None of it worked. The screams continued to wake me, knowing they were coming but not knowing when. I stopped sleeping altogether, which then began to affect the rest of my life. My behavior slipped, my grades plummeted. Teachers were calling home in shock, wondering what had happened to me. My dad explained it away with the divorce, but he knew this problem wasn't going away. So he got creative. He made me a doll, one that loosely resembled my mother. It was shoddily made with scraps of old fabric that had long been sitting in the back room of the shop. But Dad assured me that the doll was special and would watch over me as I slept. I wasn't receptive at first. Part of me was afraid of waking up in the middle of the night to find the thing screaming at me as I held it close to my face. I was pleasantly surprised when, on our very first try, I woke to a brightening pink sky. I'd made it to morning without any screams, peering into the dark corner to find nothing there. I hugged that doll so tight and never let go, going on to sleep with it far longer into my childhood than I probably should have. My dad, of course, was elated. We were both finally sleeping again. It didn't bother him that the doll needed its own dinner plate, or that it had to be buckled into the back seat, or that I'd spend all day speaking to it as though I was the mother and the doll was me. Dad would sometimes pretend to not know which one was me and which one was the doll, a gag I thoroughly enjoyed. I teased back that the Lila doll was always wearing the same outfit, so he brought up more fabric for me to look through, smiling as he sewed to the sounds of my excitement. When I asked Dad if he could also get the Lila doll a backpack and shoes, he laughed. But then a light went off in his head, a thought about turning this into something big, a fully customizable doll with an array of attachable accessories. Fun enough to play with during the day, but soft enough to be held through the night. He pitched the idea to Uncle Eddie, who was immediately on board and probably desperate for a reason to get out from behind the supermarket cash registers. With my little Lila doll tucked under my arms, I'd creep out of bed some nights to find them tirelessly sewing or debating business plans far above my head. They made deals with local retailers and even went door to door, selling whatever they could in hopes of one day bringing the corpse of their father's shop back to life. It wasn't long before we were changing the modest, black sign from Vinnie's tailor shop to a loud pink and blue that read the Lila Door Store. It was crazy how quickly our lives changed. Lila's dolls sold faster than we could make them, and before we knew it, we were opening up a second store in the South Shore Mall. Dad moved us into a much nicer place, a house overlooking the hills of our downtown, the lights of the city shining into my bedroom window. I'd never seen him so happy. Certainly not since my mother had left. When I asked if this meant she would come back, he got very stern and said no, a sharp and definitive refutal. I thought I'd done something wrong, and he must have felt bad because he softened his tone and apologized, telling me about how his mother had left him too, and that he knew how difficult it was growing up without a mommy. It would be okay, he said, because now he had me. I smiled as he tucked me in and kissed me goodnight, trying my best to swallow how deeply I missed my mother. When Grandpa passed later that year, I held my breath at the thought of her attending the funeral. It felt wrong anticipating such a thing at that time, as Dad was more upset than I'd ever seen him. Many people, most of whom I did not know, were stopping by the house for lengthy visits. Distant family or friends of my grandfather, even some loyal customers of years past who'd grown to care for him, telling tales of the work Grandpa had done to save their weddings and such. Dad accepted their sympathies as warmly as he could, as well as the never-ending onslaught of food he'd tasked Uncle Eddie with stuffing into our fridge somewhere. Uncle Eddie had been staying with us during that time, and was trying to remain busy to keep his mind off this new reality of his. It was hard seeing my ever-jolly uncle so lost and empty. With so many people showing up over the course of that week, no one batted an eye when we received knocks on our door late one night. But the concern in Uncle Eddie's voice when he called up to Dad got me out of bed and peeking from around the wall to atop the staircase. My Lila doll laying limp in my hand. It was my mother. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and a knowing smirk plastering upon her face. I gasped and dropped the doll, my dad snapping back at the sound and ordering Uncle Eddie to take me back to my room. I cried for my mother as Uncle Eddie marched me up the stairs and carried me away. She wouldn't look at me, just kept her eyes on Dad, who was ushering her outside. I hurried to the window while Uncle Eddie stood awkwardly by, unsure whether or not to stop me. I could hear their muffled voices spitting back and forth at one another. She was demanding something, putting my dad on the defensive, but about what, I wasn't sure. He told her to leave and then slammed the door in her face. I watched her turn around and head back into the night, crying out for her still even as she disappeared down the driveway and out of sight. When Dad came to check on me, I shouted at him for the very first time. I didn't understand why he wouldn't let me see her. All he could say was that he was sorry, which wasn't enough for me. I continued to shout when he suddenly snapped. The look on his face, I'd never seen it before. Even Uncle Eddie looked down at his feet. Dad spat that Mom was poison, and that seeing her would only cause me harm, that one day I'd understand. He then ordered me to bed, and that was that. But I couldn't sleep. Not that night, or the next. I'd stare out my window, waiting for Mom to come back, and when she didn't, I started to slip again. I started hearing the screams. Dad was frantic. All the progress we'd made, lost. I remember him taking me into the shop early one morning, holding my hand as he showed me around the back room where countless boxes of accessories sat waiting to be put on display. He told me I could pick one for my Lila doll, anything I wanted. It was like Christmas. I wanted all of them. When I couldn't decide, he allayed my stress by promising me that I could choose one new accessory every time another shipment came in. Within weeks, my Lila doll was a whole new girl, donning sunglasses and a bright yellow shirt, with a pretty little bow on top. I pressed each new accessory onto her like the band-aids they were. As I got older, the power of the doll faded, but my need for her remained. She sat on the shelf and watched as I snuck booze into my bedroom. My new remedy for nightmare-driven insomnia, one that, fortunately, would not last very long. The mere thought of vomiting into my toilet one more time was enough to make me sick. I knew I had to change, to find some other way to feel okay. My best friend knew it too. She dragged me with her to the animal shelter where she volunteered. It was there that I finally found some semblance of peace. I couldn't believe how much of an immediate impact it had on me. I started volunteering on my own days after school. Still, Lila dolls remained a big part of my life. At 15, I got my first job working weekends at both stores, filling in whenever I was needed. Kids at school would make fun of me. They all knew I was the doll girl. It didn't bother me. I took pride in my ability to run the store, and in my knowledge of the products we sold. As graduation drew nearer, Dad gifted me a managerial opportunity for the shop. I didn't know how to tell him I didn't want it, or that I'd applied to a university several states away, with dreams of working in wildlife conservation. All that he had done for me, it hurt me to hurt him, to turn him down and abandon the empire he'd built for me. I cried when I finally told him, but he wasn't mad or even upset. He lifted my chin so I could see his smile and then pulled me in for a hug. As we rocked gently back and forth, he whispered to me that it was okay to chase the thing that silenced my demons. He let go, but kept his hands on my shoulders, gazing at the young woman I was now. There was something else in his eye, an understanding of what I was going through, of everything I had been keeping from him. It all tempered with that one look. When I left for school, my Lila doll stayed behind because I didn't need her anymore. The next few years were like a dream. I loved my classes, my friends, the views from my dorm for the mountains I hiked every weekend. I even met a guy, Caleb. His friends called him Texas, something you understood the moment he spoke. He sat next to me in an ecology class, but spent more time studying me than he did his material. He laughed when I told him I was practically famous, so I told him to look up Lila dolls. He was stunned. From that moment, he began calling me Lila doll, something I pretended to hate, and we were dating not long after. Everything seemed to be falling into place for me, and for the first time in my life, I was happy. And then I got the call. Dad was sick. Cancer. It was awful how fast it took him, how rapidly he deteriorated before my eyes. I dropped out of school to take care of him, and within months he was gone. I could hardly look at him in the end. One of the last conversations we'd had, he'd taken my hand from the hospital bed in which he was bound, begging me to remember the man I knew him to be. I promised I would. My savior. The day he passed, I sat in my old room, waiting for him to come comfort me like he always did. It was just me now, and my Lila doll up on the shelf where I'd left her. She looked so different now than when I first got her, adorned in the very many accessories I'd collected over the years. The sunglasses still fixed upon her face. her bright yellow shirt now torn and faded. I held her close like I used to, curling into a ball at the foot of my bed. It was the closest I could get to my dad being there. I never finished school. Dad left me his share of Lila Doll, and with just 4 semesters left, I decided to run the stores instead. Caleb was supportive throughout the whole thing, as was Uncle Eddie, who, of course, knew a whole lot more about how to run the business than I did. I picked up on it quick. The hardest part was being enveloped around a permanent and painful reminder of my dad. It wasn't any easier when that pain went away. I didn't even notice when it happened. I just woke up one day and went to work, carrying on with my new routine, paid the bills, watched TV, ordered takeout, laughed without remorse, and cried about other things. Things really took off after Caleb moved in. Within a year, we were engaged, married, and announcing our pregnancy to a room full of what was almost entirely Caleb's loved ones. He could sense the hurt I was holding inside, but was too kind to challenge me on my weak assurances. I'd sometimes catch his eye from across the room, gauging my demeanor, so I'd bury the pain deeper. None of it would matter after one cold February morning. Sophia Grace was born healthy, beautiful, and perfect. It took some time for me and Caleb to adjust to our new lives as parents. I loved being a mom, but it was exhausting. Even with all the help from my amazing husband, not only was he running around for me and the baby, he was also looking after the stores in my absence. It was a lot. He'd try so hard to pitch in when he got home, but was almost always the first to fall asleep. I couldn't fault him. I was used to functioning on limited sleep. Most nights I'd stare down into my little girl's crib, studying her unconscious twitches until I was finally ready to drift off myself. Caleb caught me one time, just as the sun was beginning to come up. I lied and said I had just woken up. He continued to not push, instead retrieving my old Lila doll and placing into the crib beside Sophia. The sunglasses were stuck permanently askew, and the faded yellow shirt was becoming unstitched. Caleb joined me in admiring our daughter, wrapping his arms around me and assuring me we were safe. He then smacked me on the butt and said I should get some sleep. I wasn't out long before I heard it. A shrill, violent scream. It shot me awake and sent me into the kind of frenzy I hadn't experienced since I was a child. Caleb came rushing back into the room in a panic, checking first on Sophia, who was now awake and crying. Shaking, I asked Caleb if he heard the screams. He looked at me bewildered and said only the baby's and mine. This was his first experience with my night terrors, and I think I'd frightened him more than it did me. I had no idea why they were happening again. I just knew it was finally time to open up to Caleb about my long history with the screamy lady. He put Sophia down and held me close, rubbing my back as I sobbed and poured it all out. Once I was settled, he told me he knew what I needed to do. I needed to confront my mother. I had no idea where she was, and hadn't seen her since that night she showed up to our door. Neither had Uncle Eddie. Caleb dropped it for a while and continued to support me as best he could, trying to hide how much he, too, was plagued by the situation, a disposition I knew all too well. I worried it might tear us apart when, much like Dad had almost 20 years prior, and in the very same room in fact, Caleb turned to me with excitement, the light bulb in his head shining brightly upon his face. He suggested I submit my DNA to an ancestry website to track down traces of my mother's existence. There was a part of me that rejected the idea, this little pocket of fear that didn't want me to get my hopes up. But Caleb insisted, because he is the most wonderful man I know, and because my bouts of screaming in the middle of the night were scaring him more than he would admit. I was told I could expect my results in no less than 8 weeks. When they finally arrived, I was afraid to look at them. Caleb came home and found me in the living room feeding Sophia. The envelope on the table before me. I'd run out of nails to bite. He opened it for me, my stomach sinking as I watched his eyes dance along the pages when he suddenly stopped and grinned. I had a half-sister. Rachel and I messaged back and forth on the website before agreeing to meet in person. She actually lived nearby. I wondered how often we might have passed each other without realizing it. She invited me over for coffee and was very excited to meet, waving at me from her doorstep before I even stepped out of the car. She, too, was married with 3 kids, as was evident from the state of her home, something I found endearing. Sophia was still only an infant, and I was already thinking about having more. It was strange noting the familiarities in Rachel's face as she spoke. Our eyes were especially similar. She told me that she'd always suspected Mom was hiding something, and that she was not at all surprised to learn exactly who I was, given that Mom would never allow her to have a Lila doll. Rachel described Mom as conniving and manipulative, her father having filed for divorce after years of unhappiness. Now, Mom only came around when she needed something. Rachel was happy to give me her address, but cautioned me to not expect very much from her. If only she'd known the scenario I'd played out in my head over and over. It flashed in my mind as I pulled up to Mom's trailer later that very same afternoon. I sat frozen in my car for a while, anchored by the weight of this moment. There were people sitting in lawn chairs in front of the neighboring trailers, staring in my direction, increasing my nerves. I tried not to look at them as I marched up to my mother's door and gave 2 crisp knocks. My hands grew numb as I waited. The door opened, and my mother was standing there with a cigarette in her mouth, looking just as sour as she did the last time I'd seen her, only this time I was close enough to see the work she'd had done to her face. It was not appealing. She blew smoke out her nose and asked who I was, and when I told her it was Lila, she continued to stare through me. Her daughter, I reminded her. She asked what I was doing here, and I wasn't sure how to reply. It felt stupid having to say out loud that I was just looking to see her after all these years, that I was hoping she'd want to see me too. She hardly reacted. Just took another drag of her cigarette. I informed her that she had a new grandchild, taking out a photo for her to see. She glanced at it and scoffed, mumbling about how my dad must have been proud. When I told her that he died, she said she was sorry to hear it, and didn't even try to sound sincere. I could feel the soul being ripped out of me. I politely apologized for showing up like this and assured her I wasn't trying to be a burden. But I meant so little to her. I was less than a burden. I was an annoyance, an inconvenience, taking her away from the daytime television she was blaring in the background. When I ran out of things to say, we stood in momentary silence. She broke it with a groan and wondered if I was going to give her the money or not. I had no idea what she was talking about. She said it was the least I could do given how successful the business was, that she deserved some credit for giving me my name. I suddenly understood why she showed up in the middle of the night all those years ago, and why my dad never wanted me to see her. It was to shield me from the pain I felt in that moment. As spring rolled around, Caleb and I decided to throw a party. We both needed it. And there was still some family that had yet to meet Sophia. It was nice being able to turn our brains off while other people watched our kid. If anyone needed a drink, it was Caleb. I was more than happy to just sit back and bask in the glow of my new family, watching them take turns with my sweet little girl, her attentive eyes gazing out all the love she did not yet know she had. It had suddenly hit me how much I missed my dad. It really sneaks up on you in those moments. Caleb must have noticed because, after hurrying upstairs, he returned with my Lila doll in hand. I watched him wave it in front of Sophia's face. making it dance and playing peekaboo with the sunglasses. My mother-in-law stood by looking bemused. All of the brand new toys we'd been gifted, and he went with the ragged, old doll with the very noticeable stain. But it made Sophia smile, which made me break down. A hush fell over the room as I was constantly consoled by those around me. Caleb's sisters each rubbing my back while Uncle Eddie fetched me tissues. I always hated others' sympathy, but this time was different. This time was okay. The moment was interrupted by loud knocks on the door. Everyone looked around at each other as though trying to figure out which relative wasn't already present. Caleb announced the door was open, but the knocks rang a second time, loud and impatient. The playful confusion had quickly turned into concern. We all listened as Caleb answered the door, trying to figure out whose voice was speaking to him from the other side. His curious cousins peeking from around the kitchen doorway suddenly parted, and my husband returned looking pale and serious. He said it was the FBI, and that they needed to speak with me about something. I could hear guests panicking in the background as I nervously escorted the two agents into the living room. They placed a folder onto the glass table and spread its contents across it. Crime scene photos, reports. They were disturbing, something I'd wished they had prepared me for first. But they were very direct. They told me that they believed Dad was a serial killer, one that they'd been hunting for nearly 2 decades. I was more than confused. I told them they were mistaken. Dad was a doll maker and a great father. They said that when I submitted my DNA to the Ancestry website, they were alerted to matches on over a dozen unsolved murders in the area. My arms were tingling. I couldn't speak. They went on to describe their struggle in putting together a profile of who they'd long called the South Shore Strangler, explaining how he'd chosen his victims seemingly at random. I reluctantly gazed upon the photos once more. All women. There was something familiar about them. One was wearing sunglasses, another a yellow shirt. Caleb appeared in the doorway with Sophia in one arm and my Lila doll in the other. When I figured it out, I screamed.